From protecting civilians from criminals to becoming the criminal, some cops have been caught cheating their own jobs. The public's confidence in law enforcement is damaged by these dirty cops, which makes it more difficult for good police officers to carry out their duties efficiently. So, what are the worst crimes cops have committed? Get ready to be shocked after finding out what these dirty cops have done. First, let's discuss the story of Rafael Antonio Perez. Rafael was given a job of protecting the public by lawfully dismantling gangs. Instead, he and numerous other officers from the Rampart Division of the Los Angeles Police Department conned gang members out of drugs and cash, while also stealing and manipulating police evidence. When Perez joined the LAPD's Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums or Crash Anti-Gang Task Force, in 1995, he quickly developed a reputation as a tough cop who had a good understanding of the situations in the areas west of downtown Los Angeles that were within Rampart's jurisdiction. But by August 1998, he had been imprisoned for stealing cocaine worth $800,000 from an evidence room. And by the year 2000, he had entered into a plea agreement and accused 70 of his colleagues, crash officers, of misbehavior, ranging from ingesting alcohol while on the job to murder. The city was compelled to overturn 100 wrongful convictions and make $125 million in settlement payments as a result. So, how did Rafael Perez and his top gang fighting squad end up being held accountable for the largest police scandal in Los Angeles history? In response to a rise in the drug trade and associated gang violence, the LAPD established a specialist anti-gang task force called CRASH in 1979. The Rampart CRASH unit would represent the ideology of specialized police units that function almost independently. However, CRASH represented one front in a brutal conflict for police like Rafael Perez, who joined the task team in 1995. His reputation as a street-smart, tough cop eventually led to his transfer to Rampart Division's undercover drug team. Perez was given the duty of taking down the gangs, and both his demeanor and his ability to speak Spanish well complemented this role. Like many other young police officers, Perez experienced an adrenaline high when purchasing drugs from street vendors and reveled in his position of control. Perez thought he had discovered his niche and disregarded advice from a colleague that he loved working with drugs too much. He got involved in a lot of corrupt acts in the late 1990s, such as stealing cocaine from evidence lockers and profitably selling it. Additionally, he drugged suspects and lied in court to get them convicted. After Perez was caught stealing cocaine from the LAPD's evidence room in 1998, his activities were discovered. After being detained and accused of stealing drugs, he started working with the authorities right away in exchange for a lighter sentence. Due to Perez's assistance, a much wider LAPD police corruption scandal was uncovered. He disclosed that other crash unit officers had also engaged in criminal activity, such as fabricating evidence, robbing suspects of cash and drugs, and planting evidence. Intense pressure was placed on the LAPD as more police personnel were linked to the scam as the inquiry went on. The controversy prompted considerable adjustments to the department's rules and procedures, including the creation of new oversight structures to guarantee increased accountability and openness. It was one of the biggest police corruption scandals in American history and was dubbed the Rampart Scandal. Perez received a 5-year prison term for his involvement in the corruption case. He was nevertheless only imprisoned for 2 years before being freed and put in the witness protection program out of fear for his safety. Do you think Perez should have been let go after just 2 years? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Next, let's check out the criminal duo who were dubbed the Mafia Cops. Agents from the DEA and FBI conducted a raid on an Italian eatery off the Las Vegas Strip in 2005 on the basis of drug deal evidence acquired by a wired-up witness. They detained 2 middle-aged men. Both suspects were calmly taken into custody, one of whom had a pistol concealed in his waistband. Yet, the later unsealed indictment against the 2 men would undermine public trust in New York and bring shame on the country's largest police force. Detectives Louis Eppolito and Stephen Caracappa of the NYPD's Organized Crime Homicide Unit were, in fact, hitmen for the mafia. In 1994, the first informant who could characterize two corrupt NYPD detectives working for the mafia came forward. Prisoned Lucchese underboss Anthony Gaspipe Casso claimed responsibility for hiring their services. After being apprehended in 1993 after being on the run, Casso made an effort to negotiate a plea agreement by naming people and claimed that Caracappa and Ippolito were his crystal ball for handling informants, rivals, and potential arrests. One witness, Kaplan, testified to the most horrific instances of the mob cops crossing the line, setting up Ippolito and Caracappa to personally murder or give over for the Lucchese family's murder targets through phony arrests and traffic stop. The two detectives received a monthly salary of $4,000 for giving Casso information about law enforcement. They were paid extra for killing jobs, including $70,000 for a hit on Gambino crime family leader Eddie Lino, who was thought to have been responsible for a botched assassination attempt on Casso. In April 2006, a Brooklyn federal court jury determined that the duo was accountable for 8 homicides, kidnappings, and other crimes. Ippolito was found guilty on 1 count of ERIC, conspiracy money laundering, drug distribution, and drug conspiracy. Caracappa was found guilty on 1 count of RICO conspiracy. Caracappa, along with Luis Ippolito, were sentenced to life in prison in 2009 for the 8 executions they committed between 1986 and 1991. Caracappa got an additional 80-year prison sentence and was issued $4.25 million in fine. The next case will shock you more. It's about the most crooked cop in NYPD history. Officer Michael Dowd testified with striking candor before a panel looking into corruption in the New York Police Department in late September 1993. In his testimony to the Mullen Commission, Mr. Dowd described his decade-long transformation from an honorable rookie in the violent 75th Precinct in East New York, Brooklyn, to what one federal agent termed a once-in-a-generation corrupt cop. When crack cocaine first hit the streets in 1982, Michael Dowd joined the New York Police Department. He was in charge of East New York's 75th Precinct, which had the second highest murder rate in the city, with more than 100 homicides annually. But Mike Dowd soon realized how lucrative the drug trade was in comparison to his $600 weekly paycheck. He first only took money from crime scenes. Yet, when his behavior was left unchecked, he started robbing drug dealers and doing his own drug peddling. By 1986, he had begun working for cocaine trafficker Adam Diaz, who earned $1 million weekly. Dowd was paid generously by Diaz to inform him of impending raids and transport his drugs throughout the city. Diaz wanted an insider to alert him to potential threats since he used East New York supermarkets as fronts for his profitable cocaine activities. He paid Dowd $24,000 and $8,000 weekly pay to buy him out. So, whose story do you think was the most notorious? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Why are you giving me the finger? What? What's your problem? What? Why are you giving me the finger?
The video shows an officer driving a car, but suddenly he stops because of a teen who showed him the middle finger. So what did he do actually? Why did the boy take part in such behavior? Stay tuned to the video till the end to find out.
Why are you giving me the finger? What's your problem?
Am I free to go?
No.
What, do you have a problem?
No.
You have a problem?
No.
You don't have a problem, then I can leave.
Why are you giving me the finger when you're walking?
The officer gets out of the car and asks the boy exactly what is his problem. Why are you giving me the middle finger? But the boy does not react directly and instead asks whether he is free to leave. The officer refuses to let him go and questions him again about why he gave him the middle finger.
Huh? Come here. Get over here.
What?
Get over here.
Is that a lawful order?
Yeah.
For what reason?
Because you're giving me the finger.
The cop asks the boy again to come over. The boy asks him if it is a legal order, but he doesn't understand why. The officer then tells him that it is against the law for him to give the officer the finger, but the boy says that's not true. According to the law, Mr. Walker's use of the middle finger was protected speech, and he could not be arrested for making the gesture at corporal pitch.
Whatever. What?
You heard me. What,
Come
you
here.
I'm afraid of you?
Come here. Get over here.
What?
Get over here.
The officer lets him go, but as the boy walks off, he again says something disrespectful to the officer.
Get over here.
I'm not doing anything illegal.
Yeah, you are. You just cursed me off.
That's not a crime.
Yes, it is.
The cop tells the boy to come over here when he calls him back. The boy then says, I'm not breaking the law, but the cop says it is against the law because he cursed at him. The argument between the boy and the officer carries on until this happened.
Help!
No help.
Help!
No.
Help!
When Mr. Walker begins screaming for help, the officer grabs him and puts his hands behind his back. Corporal Pritch turns his body-worn camera off and doesn't turn it back on until backup comes. It is obvious that the officer's actions, including turning off the body-worn camera, violated both state law and the Attorney General's policy.
It is legal. He's allowed to
Who is
detain
this
you
kid?
until he performs his
So what am I
investigation.
doing though? What am I doing that made him detain me? What legal
Every
right?
time I rode by him twice, he shot me the finger. So I turned around and said, "Well, you're
Is that a crime?
problem?"
The other officer arrives and says it's legal to detain the boy, but the boy is still arguing that it is not a crime. So the first officer explains that he has shown the middle finger twice.
He's looking at you because he's like, "What the fuck you want me to do?" Because it's not a crime. I know my rights.
Who are you?
I don't have to say any of that.
You do if being detained.
For what reason?
What?
The boy then asks the officers who have just come, what's the legal reason I'm being held? Where is this coming from? And what's the legal reason? Michael James LaMontagne arrives on the scene and informs the boy is required to identify himself because he is being detained despite the fact that he cannot provide a legal justification for the detention. However, New Jersey lacks a stop and identify statute that specifically requires Mr. Walker to identify himself, and courts have determined that New Jersey's obstruction statute cannot be applied to individuals who refuse to identify themselves to police.
Why are you?
Shooting me the finger.
Why are you?
Is that illegal?
Why are you
Cursing at
flipping the bird? Yes, it is. When you are cursing in public, you are causing a public disturbance. You're being a nuisance to the public.
The second officer asserts that the boy must identify himself. The officer goes on to explain that it is forbidden to curse in public because you're causing a public disturbance and being a nuisance to the public. In what way? When he was driving by. It's called calls from a public disturbance, and it doesn't mean you've been charged with anything. You're being detained at that point.
What reason does he need to detain me?
He thought maybe he thought you were signaling him down. Were
I
you
was.
signaling to him?
No,
Listen, I was
no,
just-
you knew very well that I wasn't signaling to you, right? I wasn't signaling
Well,
to you.
you bring attention to yourself. Your
That's not
actions-
signaling.
Your action's strange. I'm making sure you're okay.
Dude, that's so funny. Like, you're not here for my safety. You're not trying to protect
How
me.
do you know?
You're walking
may
on the
be-
side of the road and you're cursing and you're flipping the bird.
The boy asks again for what reason he's being detained, and they all start arguing.
Do you know him? Do you know him?
It's not your business. I
It is
plead
my
the fifth.
business.
I plead the fifth then.
It's
What's
the
the
public
First
law.
Amendment for?
Okay. The First Amendment is for your freedom of speech. Okay.
Okay.
What does that have to do with
Was I
using
making a call
gestures?
to action? Am I calling for an action to be done against you?
Do
No.
you understand
You're
that
bringing
it is?
attention to
Listen,
yourself and
listen,
get
listen, listen.
That's illegal.
It's.
The boy asks for his First Amendment, and the officer explains it.
So
Well, I
legally,
would-
you need to hold anything.
Well, I want to know from your
I
perspective. What was I
pulled up
doing?
onto the scene, so you tell me what you were
To
doing.
bring your attention.
I plead the fifth. Idiot. How long have you been a cop? 6?
Longer than you.
Listen,
Longer than you, I'm not a cop.
I don't understand what the point of this is.
The boy asks for the perspective of another cop.
Now what happens?
He just admitted that
now
he was
what
going
happens
to arrest
is when
me.
he gives you a lawful order to stop, and you do
It
not
wasn't a
stop,
lawful order, though.
and you do not stop.
It legally was not a
and
lawful
you
order.
do not stop, then that becomes a criminal offense, and then yes, you can be put under
But
arrest.
it's not a lawful order. Then I take it to court, and then he'd get sued, and I get
Maybe.
punitive damages. I'd be rich. Is that what you want?
That
Oh,
may,
you don't know the
that
law,
may
buddy.
be what happens.
You don't know
if
the
you
law.
think that's going to happen.
The boy laughs at what the officer says and then says he just admitted he gives you a lawful order to stop and you don't do it. It wasn't all Florida, though, and you do it legally. That becomes a criminal offense, and then yes, you can be put under, but it's not a lawful order. Then I take it to court, and then he gets sued and I get millions in damages. I'd be rich is what you wanted. The officer stated that the Fourth Amendment was not violated in this case since no seizure happened. Mr. Walker, the boy, was not arrested. However, as the Supreme Court explained in the infamous 1968 decision of Terry v. Ohio, the Fourth Amendment guarantees the right of the people to be safe in their persons, homes, papers, or belongings against unreasonable searches and seizures. However, it is clear that Mr. Walker was captured when Corporal Pritch, the officer, made physical contact with him in order to prevent him from fleeing. However, it is also quite likely that a judge would determine that Mr. Walker was detained for Fourth Amendment purposes when Corporal Pritch first ordered him to stop and he accepted.
That may be what's going to happen. It may not be what happens. Okay.
Okay, I
What may
understand.
happen is
All right, so
is
what
you
are we
may get a
wasting time
normal
for?
jury.
Am I free to go?
What
Am
may
I free to
happen
go?
is you may get
Am I
a
free to
normal
go?
jury. No, because at this point
For what reason?
you were detained. Okay, because he told you to stop
Okay.
and you didn't stop.
Okay.
So therefore, you need to identify yourself as a part of the investigation. So what is your name?
Okay, I'm gonna need all of your badge numbers.
I will give you everything written down on a card. What is your
I
name?
can give you.
If you have an ID, that's perfect.
Am I? Okay, I'll take it to court
you have
because
an
this
ID,
is still a detainment.
Are you a juvenile?
This is an illegal detainment,
Are
so
you
I
a
can
juvenile?
still. I'm not going to answer that.
The teenager asks if he is free to leave, but the officer says no because he is detained. He must identify himself as a participant in the investigation. The boy becomes more aware of his surroundings and informs them that he intends to take off all the badge numbers. The officer responds that everything will be written down on a card, but the boy believes it is still entertaining.
Okay?
Well, I'm going to
And
take
you
a
can do
lawsuit.
that.
So who would I press criminal charges against? What?
You're gonna have to. You're gonna have to
police
call.
officers.
You're gonna have to call and figure that out with a lawyer. You would have to file a complaint with the courts.
Got it.
Okay, and then you can go from there if you want to see if you can press charges and whatnot if you're
Perfect.
violating your rights.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
All right, am I free to go?
Don't give us fingers.
Shut the up.
Stay out of the roadway. Stop causing a public alarm.
Dude, shut the up. Am I free
Stop
to go?
cursing, okay?
Well, I'm going to
Then
take
you
a
can do
lawsuit.
that.
So who would I press criminal charges against? What?
You're gonna have to. You're gonna have to
police
call.
officers.
You're gonna have to call and figure that out with a lawyer.
The boy asks the lawyer to prove them wrong legally about how he was making a disturbance. The officer tells him that for further investigation, he'll have to call and talk to a lawyer about that. If your rights have been violated, you have to make a complaint with the courts. From there, you can decide if you want to press charges or do other things.
Am I
You're free to go.
Stop cursing. Go.
You're free to.
When the officers let him go free, Mr. Walker left from there without causing any further incident. After the incident, less information was known, so we don't know what they did as per the investigation.
Police officers are charged with protecting the people, maintaining the law, and providing honorable and honest service to their communities. However, the repercussions can be severe and widespread when officers violate that trust and take part in corrupt practices. In this video, we'll look at several notorious instances of police misconduct and analyze how they affected society. So, let's get going. You've probably heard of police officers accepting bribes, but have you ever heard of the team's most popular officer being dishonest and carrying out his evil schemes in such a covert manner that not even his department is aware of it? So, how did he end up in custody? If you haven't heard of something similar, allow us to inform you that Sergeant Wayne Jenkins was a victim of it. A smart, crooked policeman. Sergeant Wayne Jenkins' eyes darted from screen to screen, sifting over the CTV footage in the dimly lit city headquarters of the Baltimore Police Department. 2015's that day saw streets filled with boiling rage. On the west side of the city, police officers were being attacked with bricks. Some were hurt. Jenkins hurried after them. In the midst of shouting, sirens, and buzzing helicopters, he seized a state prison department van and helped pull injured cops inside. When it was near Druid Hill Park, he intervened in the conflict and instructed the detective to take them to the hospital. A drug-dealing bail bondsman was awoken from his slumber several hours later in a peaceful waterfront district 15 miles east of the city center. His supplier required the disposal of 2 garbage bags full of prescription medications stolen from people who had also robbed pharmacy. Fresh after his heroic deeds in West Baltimore, Jenkins showed up. He opened the trunk and carried the pills inside the garage after the bondsman handled selling them. The police sergeant and the latter would split the proceeds. Wayne Jenkins was living 2 lives at a time. He was already well known for running aggressive street squads at the age of 34. Later, he was in charge of the prestigious Gun Trace Task Force, one of the Baltimore Police Department's most effective tools for combating violent crime. He also served as the commanding officer of a team of police officers who engaged in robberies and narcotics trafficking. Jenkins and 6 members of his gun task force were charged with federal racketeering in March 2017, which shocked Baltimore. Many robberies, extortion, and overtime fraud were all allegedly committed by a group of seasoned police officers. Following the shooting death of Freddie Gray, long-standing mistrust of the police among many Baltimore residents grew. But the breadth and depth of these accusations were astounding. The Gun Trace Task Force was well known within the police force for its accomplishments in seizing alleged drug dealers, their caches, and their illicit weaponry. Jenkins was developing a reputation as a policeman in the division whose aggressive approach got results. His reputation as a cowboy who broke big cases through a frenetic pace of citizen stops and occasionally supplied evidence, pointing up a chain of drug dealers, was generally positive among current and former police officers. Jenkins, who had been praised as a rising talent by department leadership and rank-and-file officers early in his career, was a leader with a remarkable flair for delivering the goods. For his assistance in the 2009 recovery of 41 kilograms of cocaine, worth $1 million hidden in a man's truck at the time, it was touted as the largest cocaine seizure in the division's record. This was only one of Jenkins' numerous huge seizures. Did you know that Jenkins was awarded a Bronze Star for this huge achievement? Although it may seem strange, the Baltimore Police Department did not experience any instances of a police officer receiving both praise and criticism. In the world, Wayne Jenkins and his colleagues in plainclothes lived in success and wrongdoing were not mutually exclusive. In fact, they occasionally seemed to go hand in hand. A year-long investigation by the Baltimore Sun turned up warning signs that Wayne Jenkins wasn't a reliable policeman. His supervisors and others either failed to see the warning indications or choose to ignore them. Between 2006 and 2009, Jenkins was the subject of at least 4 lawsuits that claimed misconduct. 3 of them resulted in the plaintiff's victories, either as a result of jury verdicts or the city's decision to settle the case. The suits, however, had no internal repercussions for the police agency. Despite the lawsuits and subsequent video evidence from the squad's body cameras, Jenkins' supervisors did not review the arrests he was making. His legal defenses regularly failed in court, despite the fact that he was removing criminal suspects off the streets. 2014 saw the delivery of a surveillance video to the state's attorney's office in Baltimore's Police Integrity Division that seemed to show Jenkins perhaps putting drugs in a suspect's car. Authorities investigated the matter and even presented evidence to a grand jury, but finally determined that there wasn't enough proof to warrant an indictment. The same video reportedly led to a rare police department disciplinary probe against Jenkins, who was accused of misbehavior internally in 2015. This information comes from a copy of the case file that the Sun reviewed. The investigators proposed Jenkins be demoted and placed on paid leave, according to the department's then Internal Affairs Chief, Daryl DeSouza, who was the deputy commissioner at the time, allegedly intervened to halt the penalty. DeSouza denies remembering the encounter, despite having later served as a commissioner and currently being in jail on federal tax charges, before being named in 2016 to lead the Gun Trace Task Force, one of the most recognized plainclothes teams in the police. These allegations of misconduct were made while Jenkins was serving in a number of plainclothes units, a long time before he was appointed. It is hardly surprising that Jenkins' greatest crimes, drug trafficking and robberies, were able to flourish in Baltimore's tolerant plainclothes culture, even if they seem to have been kept secret. These devices regularly operated unattended. They were free to hold and release suspects, as well as develop informants. They sometimes discreetly stepped over the line from aggressive policing to violating civil rights. When Jenkins first started stealing is unknown. In 2011, his first theft was reported. By the time his criminal career had completely taken off, it had already involved high-profile robberies and break-ins, and he was making over $170,000 per year, in part due to overtime fraud. To learn more about their activities, the Sun obtained thousands of pages of court records, dozens of body camera recordings, hundreds of emails from the police department, and a small number of internal files. A reporter also viewed court case recordings pertaining to the arrests of the cops. Over 50 people were questioned, including victims, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and current and former police officers. Jenkins allegedly robbed some of the defense attorney's clients. According to some of the attorneys, the bulk of his co-workers, including the police and prosecutors, told the Sun they were not aware that he and his policemen were involved in any illicit behavior. A drug associate alleged that Jenkins had been gathering narcotics off the street and profiting from their illicit sale for years before he was finally found guilty following an FBI investigation. Prior to joining the Gun Trace Task Force in 2016, some of his colleagues have also acknowledged stealing, after an FBI investigation into the unit revealed the crimes committed by the GATF Jenkins and a number of other team members were taken into custody by federal agents. In June 2018, Jenkins was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison after entering a guilty plea to charges of racketeering, robbery, and record-keeping fraud. Corrupt police officers damage the reputation of their fellow officers who obey the law and honorably and devotedly serve their community. They damage the reputation of the entire police force and make it harder for honorable officers to carry out their duties efficiently. The integrity of the judiciary and law enforcement is threatened by corruption and immoral and unlawful practice. In addition to breaking the law, corrupt police officers damage the public's faith by taking bribes, covering up crimes, or employing excessive force. Furthermore, dishonest police officers can cause harm to innocent people by infringing on their civil rights, making false arrests, and acting abusively. This can result in erroneous convictions, the demise of the rule of law, and a loss of confidence on the part of the general people in the competence of the legal system to uphold their rights and interests. Public safety is compromised, and the rule of law is weakened by corrupt police officers. They undermine public trust in the police and foster an atmosphere of impunity where criminals feel free to act without consequence because they know that some police officers can be purchased or intimidated. What conclusions have you drawn from Jenkins' tale? Do you have any additional examples of dishonest police officers who were punished? If so, please tell us in the comments section. The residents of Baltimore were shocked to know that they were not safe in their homes. The members of the Gun Track Task Force were engaging in dishonest business practices, including fraud, extortion, and robbery.
Corrupt cops who swore to protect and serve were nothing more than criminals.
Their secrets were revealed in 2017, and since then, the Baltimore story was covered by the media extensively. How did they get caught? How did they manage to save their faces all these years? The significant news that this legendary police fraud gang had been exposed stemmed from the death of Freddie Gray. Given that Freddie died unexpectedly while in police custody, the Baltimore police station was under investigation. To find out how Freddie died and what caused it, an investigation was carried out. According to the inquiry report, 6 Baltimore police officers were involved in the arrest of Freddie Gray. He was caught selling drugs when he was detained. He was dragged to the police van, where they locked the door. But the fact that they disregarded safety precautions and endangered Freddie's life is what went wrong. The policeman in the van was playing with him like he was a toy. He was treated inhumanely and subjected to terrible torture. He was prohibited from using a seatbelt, and his wrists and feet were bound. He was not permitted to have any type of basic safety equipment. His spinal cord and neck were seriously hurt. He was unable to withstand the torture and passed away a week later as a result. There was something strange about the police officers. Therefore, the Department of Justice decided to look into it further. Rod Rosenstein of the DEA decided to investigate and expose this terrible tale. These 6 officers were accused of manslaughter for having little compassion for Freddie, knowing that the police force they had blindly trusted could do something terrible, shocked the public. This top-notch police unit was comprised of Thomas Allers, Mamadou Gondo, Jamel Rayam, Evodio Hendricks, Maurice Ward, Marcus Taylor, Daniel Herschel, and Wayne Jenkins. Everyone paid attention to Wayne since he was the leader. Wayne Jenkins was the worst law enforcement official there has ever been. The GTF was run by him, and he was in charge. You can refer to him as the mastermind. The Gun Track Task Force was uncovered in 2017 by a unit member who confessed to his crimes on a video that the DIA heard. Gondo was in touch with the narcotics gang. The investigators' discovery of the crucial clue that caused them to begin to question the police officers marked this moment as the pivotal one. Gondo's confessions were all recorded by the DAA. He disclosed his involvement in drug sales and use. The DA was surprised when he subsequently detailed other crimes in which he had participated. These police officers have committed a seemingly endless number of crimes. They had a good plan that they followed exactly every day without fail. The drug dealers were their major focus. They would target and torture these individuals. All the narcotics would be removed and sold again. They made more money from this than they could have as a police officer. They go looking for drug dealers to extort drugs and cash from every day. They lack any emotional attributes that a person should have, along with any sense of professional responsibility for the work they conduct as police officers. The only thing they cared about was gathering more drugs to sell. They will make a significant amount of money from this. They did not shoot other individuals with the illegal guns they carry, but instead unintentionally planted explosives on them. They could then detain anyone in possession of an unauthorized firearm. These officers were brought before the court to make confessions after being apprehended. Hearing about all the crimes these officers committed in a short amount of time startled the jury. Wayne once observed some men robbing a drugstore with the assistance of other officers. They valiantly put an end to the robbery, but they were not acting alone. They kept up the robbery and took drugs from that location. After plundering the business, they sold the drugs to additional drug dealers. Through that, they became very wealthy. A prominent drug dealer suspect's house was searched without warning after they stole his house keys. Then they went ahead and made off with $100,000 from there. They used to indiscriminately drive cars at high speeds in a crowd of people, exhibiting a cruel mentality. These policemen hunt people who flee for their life before arresting them. By carrying out such awful deeds, they feel strong and joyful. They fitted illegal tracking devices in the cars of narcotics dealers to follow them. The police officers would be able to find out where and when these drug sellers will be using this equipment. The cops from the GATF either raid their residences or steal their drugs and cash. They committed all of these acts over the last 3 years without anyone even suspecting them. They discriminated against and held a negative attitude towards black people. Throughout this brief time, they stole somewhere around $300,000. They stole 7 pounds of cocaine during these 3 years. From the narcotics sellers, they also took 43 pounds of marijuana. In addition to this, they converted the proceeds from the sale of pricey, one-of-a-kind jewels into cash. According to their respective portions, they divided up the entire sum of money and spent it all on themselves. A group of police officers could not possibly have committed such heinous atrocities while on duty. The court could not believe it. They received a sentence of 112 years. They must serve that sentence in prison. Jenkins, the chief of the GITF, received a particularly lengthy sentence because he was the perpetrator of all of these crimes. Jenkins is currently serving a sentence of 25 years in a Kentucky prison. These policemen's crimes had a significant impact on the Baltimore Police Department. Both the general public and other departments must come to trust them. Others now view them with contempt since what this policeman did was unjustifiable. The HBO miniseries with that title is called We Own This City. The Baltimore incident served as inspiration for the producers, who turned it into a miniseries and showed it to the audience. Even among female police officers, there are nasty ones. Let's witness the account of a female police officer who was deceived by love and wealth. A female police officer named Antoinette Frank and her boyfriend Rogers Lacaze committed a terrible crime together. The horrifying murder occurred on March 4, 1995, stunning the residents of New Orleans. Together with her family, Chauveau managed her restaurant. They made a substantial fortune through their family business, Kim Ainge, to watch after their business. They had enlisted Ronald Williams as a part-time security guard. In his spare time, Ronald works there. He used to be a police officer when Frank and her boyfriend, a drug dealer, stormed into the restaurant and demanded money. Chauveau called Ronald to the dining room to give his wages. Frank began threatening Chauveau and her brother. Ronald tried to intervene to defend the siblings, but Frank's lover shot him. She panicked since Frank hadn't anticipated things to go worse. Chau and her brother hid in the walk-in fridge as Frank turned around to hunt for her companion. The older siblings, Kuang and Ha-Vu, were cleaning the restaurant when the incident occurred. Frank questioned them over the money, but Chau had hidden it in the microwave. She shot the 2 older siblings as soon as Frank discovered the money. Both of them received death sentences after being tried in court. Frank was transferred to a Louisiana prison for women. Do you believe there are other officers like this in law enforcement? Do you anticipate a repeat of this incident? Let us know in the comments